Thank you for joining me for another episode of Wake and Empower TV. I'm your host, Ethan Fox. Today I'm joined by Caroline Cory. We have some very fascinating discussions about consciousness, the Akashic Records, and how information is received by intuitive channels and mediums, and also how emotions express energetically. And we further discuss the idea of the law of attraction and whether our lives are predestined and to what degree law of attraction has an impact on our human experience, as well as whether we have free will and how that free will can express. A lot of very interesting topics today. So without any further delay, here's Caroline Cory. Hello, Carolyn. Welcome to Awaken Empower TV. It's really nice for me to have you with me today. Where are you calling from today?
I'm actually in Los Angeles, California.
Okay. And that's where you're based, right?
Right now, yes. Uh-huh.
So tell me a bit about your background, even going as far back as childhood. And I know you've had some very interesting awakening experiences throughout your life, especially early on in childhood. But I'd like to first start with a bit of background, anything that you think is relevant, your educational experience, or and what brought you from there to the work that you're doing now.
So when I was a child, I actually grew up in France. So I have a bit of that culture in me, but I spent most of my life in the US, but also I traveled when I was older in Asia. So I feel like I'm a bit of a citizen of the world. But my education, actually my formal education, I finished college and in the United States, and I studied psychology. Because I was always interested in how the human mind works. When I was much younger, I had direct experiences with the other worlds, if you will. I had spiritual experiences, even as early as 5 years old. And so I was always wondering how these experiences actually happened, how the mind actually works. And I would, as a child, I would look around at all the adults and wonder, why are they behaving this way? Like, what is the reason for this behavior or that behavior? So as a young child, I was always wondering about the mechanics of the brain, and so that got me to want to study psychology. But by the time I got to graduate school, I was doing my master's, and I realized the academic was very, how should I say, very kind of I was going to say by the book, but it is by the book, but meaning it felt like a little bit like one size fits all. If you have this kind of pattern or this problem, it means this. If you have this other problem, it means that. And because I had all these direct experiences myself, I realized there's a lot more to it than just, having these sorts of dreams. Therefore, you have this block with your mother or this problem with your father. And so I wanted to explore more based on the direct experiences that I had beyond, the psychology background that I had. And so because of that, I got into consciousness, the world of consciousness, because I realized that what I was tapping into as a child was consciousness. Where I was looking at a person, and when they were, let's say, angry or sad or sick or anything was going on with them, I was tapping into their entire story, not just their aura or to see what was wrong with this physical organ. So I realized that consciousness is the whole universe of information. And so I started with my direct experience as a child and pretty much developed an entire methodology of how to tap into consciousness, what consciousness is, how it is created at a universal level, how it manifests in human form, and so on and so forth. So in a nutshell, that's my background.
And you've also been on some different, I think you've had some documentaries or been on Ancient Aliens as well, right?
Yes, yes, actually. Well, Asian Aliens is, I was a guest expert talking about, I mean, as you know, the show talks about the history of humans coming in contact with perhaps an extraterrestrial race. But sometimes they have topics that have to do with tapping into the Akashic field or tapping into those higher level or higher dimensional beings that they call, you know. And so sometimes they call me to comment on that. So I've been on a couple of their seasons, and actually I have a couple coming up. So we'll be posting when the airtime for these episodes on our Facebook page if people want to check it out.
Tell me more about the experiences you had as a child. I think you were, what, 5 years old, I think you said?
Yes, so I think I've always had experiences, but the one that's the most significant in the sense that I remember everything about it, and that was kind of a turning point. So I was 5 years old, and I was just minding my own business. It was Christmas Eve, actually, interestingly enough. And I was just standing there in the living room, and all of a sudden there was this ball of energy that manifested right next to me. And of course, no one could see it or sense it or anything. And so, so we started, so right away, it connected with my brain, with my consciousness, and we started communicating telepathically. It was so natural. It was so spontaneous. It wasn't strange. I wasn't scared. It just kind of was there. And so I realized and I sensed and I knew and I understood in that one split second that this consciousness was a group of beings, and the telepathic communication, they start telling me, we are now communicating telepathically. We are transferring information into your consciousness, and you are transferring it back. And the reason why we want you to kind of pay attention to this is because that's how you're going to be communicating. That's how you communicate with otherworldly beings in other dimensions, etc. And that's how we are going to continue communicating. So they kind of showed me that, you know, when you have an entire sentence in human language, you have an entire concept or an entire sentence, and that sentence, instead of saying the words one at a time or putting the letters together, you put the whole concept together and you squish it basically into one code. And so I could see a bunch of codes kind of coming into my human brain, and those codes are refer to the entire concept. So you could actually have 3 or 4 or 5 codes in your brain, and that actually mean an entire story or an entire book. So that was so imagine I'm 5 years old, you know, getting this information. It felt so natural, so normal. It felt like this is something that all children know and do, and so I wasn't surprised, you know, and I kept going. And what happens is that, just to stay on this topic, because I know some people may be very intrigued, what happened is that these codes, even though you don't know how to translate them as a human person, as a human, but your brain knows how to decode them. It's kind of like a computer script. If you look at like a bunch of little things, symbols and stuff, you don't know what that means, but your computer does. So it's kind of like that. So your brain, we don't realize that the human brain has this, what people call 10% capacity, meaning that you learn a language, you learn grammar and a bunch of words, and then you learn to use that language to speak, to communicate. But actually your brain as well, your full brain capacity, is capable of using these codes that are universal. So all these codes you can understand, I can understand, everybody can understand, and your brain can understand. The fact that you as a human don't know how to use your brain doesn't mean that your brain doesn't know how to use itself. You know what I mean? So your brain then decodes these messages, and eventually people have an aha moment. They go like, oh my God, you know, I think I just downloaded, or I just felt that I had this past life, or I understood something very profound, or I saw myself, you know, so on and so forth. So that's how it works. So imagine having that experience at the age of 5. And the reason why this was significant, as you can already tell, is because that allowed me to continue using my brain to allow these universal knowledge and universal codes to continue to enter my human consciousness, so that I continue to utilize this knowledge, this higher knowledge. So that's why I say this experience was the most significant for me, and from that also I was able to eventually develop all the methodology, later on, that have to do with consciousness. How to shift your brain from linear thinking from 10% to this full percent. How to tap into different layers of reality, and so on and so forth. So that was that first significant experience.
Let me make sure I understand correctly. So these codes they're multidimensional information encoded, and that's how they're sending information to you all the time?
Yes, and not just me. Guess what? They're sending it to you and to everyone else.
So everyone is receiving this, but not everyone is seeing it like you are.
Exactly, seeing it or sensing it or understanding it for sure. That's how, it's a universal language, you know, like it's kind of like the codes are pouring in. They're pouring even into the collective consciousness. And so it's kind of like, if you can imagine a super, super, super transparent internet system. You know, that all the information is there, but you know, and so if you want to retrieve it, you just retrieve it, but you don't know how it works, and of course you dismiss it. So of course nobody teaches that to us at school, you know, so that's the reason why. So that information is already out there, and it's coming in. As the minute you say, I want to tap into universal consciousness, I want to you know, bring something through or what have you, that information starts to pour in, but it comes in ways of codes. So your human mind goes, I didn't get anything. I don't know. I asked about, I don't know, let's say your past life or something. You know, so you get the codes, but you think you got nothing. Or you don't know that you get something, you know, so you dismiss it, and you kind of think, oh, that doesn't work, or it doesn't exist, and so on and so forth. But yeah, go ahead.
Who were these beings that you were communicating with? Were they extra-dimensional, extraterrestrial, or just some collective consciousness?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So eventually, because that communication was so organic, not only, you know, it was just telepathic, but also you kind of merge with the consciousness. So you know everything about the consciousness. There's no separation between you and this consciousness. And so I could see, and they said, but I could also see and sense that their consciousness kept going, because I kind of like could follow it, because I could see the subtle energy. I could literally see it. And so since I was a child, since that time, it became that much more accurate. But so I could kind of follow their consciousness, and I could see that they originated beyond this earth, beyond this planetary system, beyond this galaxy. It kind of kept going and going and going. And I saw that it was a universal, like it went very, 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 very far away. it went very far away into the universe. It came out from the core. I saw a huge hub. And I know I kind of understood that and saw that it was basically what I call source. The source is kind of the hub of this entire universe. So that's where they came from. And that's what they said they came from. But that's what I also experienced that they came from. So that's the type of consciousness that they were.
Now, is that true for everybody? If like the examples used earlier, if somebody asks about a past life or some kind of guidance and they receive what is termed a download, is that always coming from source, or is it sometimes coming from other dimensional beings?
Love your question, Ethan. That's great. That is the problem. It's because we don't know how to use our consciousness to tap in and retrieve this information. Most of the time we ask the question and then we get something, and that could be coming from your own higher self, from an angel being that happens to be floating around, an extraterrestrial that could, be happen to be passing around, some dark entity, that's playing with you, that's sending you some very cool message so you can pay attention, could be coming from them, could be coming from very far away into the cosmos, from a galactic consciousness. That's the problem. And so what happens is that's the first reason why I developed my methodology, because I wanted to have a protocol for people to have this clarity and discernment, because I realized the danger of it, in the sense that because we are not trained as humans, we're not educated, we're not helped and supported, in that world. We humans are open to all sorts of problems because of that. And so I also see, because I perceive this little energy, I could see sometimes that somebody was tapping into their own higher consciousness, but they were saying that they were channeling, let's say, Jesus or Saint Germain or something. Now, it doesn't mean that they could not tap into the consciousness of Jesus or Saint Germain, but it was really their higher consciousness, their higher self, so to speak, that was tapping into the memory of Saint Germain or Jesus. That's not the same thing. Now, again, this is not to put anything down or say anything negative about anybody's technique or method, or work. It's simply to say that sometimes, or most of the time, it's not that accurate, and we make mistakes, and sometimes we get these messages that sound very, very cool, and so we start paying attention to them and to that being, and it becomes kind of like whatever they say is truth. But sometimes I also notice and realize, working with so many people, I've been doing this for 20 years now. Professionally, I've been doing my own work for my own whole life, but professionally, let's say working with others, what happens is that you kind of get addicted in a way, or you kind of, every time you want to retrieve information or any sort of guidance, you go back to that being that told you very cool stuff, 3 years ago. And the problem with that is that this is not to say that this being is necessarily negative, but it's also to say that you are now addicted or programming yourself to retrieve higher knowledge always through that consciousness. And ultimately, we are here to, every single human is ultimately here to retrieve their own information through their own higher consciousness directly from the source. And I believe that's the reason why I had this experience so strongly, and I understood it and I could see, so that I can help others make that distinction. So maybe this being has been in your life to kind of open you up to that ability, to help you get comfortable with that possibility, to train you to focus in a certain way. So there are a lot of benefits for that. But just to say, put it out there, that this is not the ultimate goal. The idea is that as a human, you are meant to allow or train your human brain to tap into your own higher consciousness, universal consciousness that is always and remain connected to the source. And so, and the source, like I said, I called it like a hub. It's kind of, if you want to look at it as the brain, okay? So if it's the brain, not to make it not personalized, because it does personalize in beings as well, like those beings, but just to say that, if you want to compare it with the human body. So the human body is one entity, but your hand doesn't move on its own. It moves, because it's connected to the brain, because the brain is telling it to move. I mean, your intent, okay, I want to move my hand, but it wouldn't move if it was detached from the source. So for example, if you're tapping into this entity and saying, give me some information, I want you to do this or whatever, it's good. It's you still have an effect because your consciousness still works through intent, but still ultimately, the information of your hand is contained within the main hub. The main hub has all of the information of all that is. So why go to the local distributor, if you will, if you have the ability to go to the main creator of all that is, you see? And I believe that that's ultimately the reason and the work that the humans are here to do in terms of consciousness.
So is that why I find that, and I've listened to a number of different kinds of channels and had some on my show, and as well as mediums, and it seems like, from my experience, two different channels can channel the same being or consciousness, and yet the message seems to be a bit colored in some cases by the personality or general approach of that particular person. Is that so? Are you saying in those cases, so in some cases they may be channeling the actual being, but in some cases they may be channeling their own higher self?
Yes, regardless, they're still going through their higher self regardless, but sometimes it's the memory of that being. It's this quantum signature, without getting too technical, but it's the energy form, let's say, of that being. It's not the actual being. Sometimes it is the actual being. But I'm glad you're bringing up the point of being colored by, because if there is the consciousness of that being, the fact that this being has a different perspective than yours in a higher dimensional field, this being is going to have a wider perspective. So whatever they say is going to sound a lot smarter than the human perspective. But this does not mean that they are the ultimate all-knowing being. So, for example, there are beings even in this galaxy, I mean, Arcturians or Pleiadians or what have you, that they're a lot more advanced on a consciousness level, and they, and they're, so compared with the human that's very limited, that's very confused, that's living in this reality that's very distorted and chaotic, of course, what they're saying sounds so pure and so amazing. So, and makes a lot more sense and a lot, bigger, more intelligent. And so, but don't forget, this is still a material being, an evolutionary type being that is within a galaxy that is still needs to connect to the main hub. You see what I mean? So even though it's colored, it doesn't have to, when you say colored, it's not necessarily negatively colored, but it's still going through their level of awareness. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that now once this message gets transferred into the channel, or the person that is channeling the information, now here's another layer of problems. Because how do you train yourself to receive any information from somewhere else without allowing it to go through your own filters? Those filters could be educational, could be things that if, for example, some of these channels have a background in Hindu culture, or they followed shamanic training or what have you. Again, this is not to say it's right or wrong. It's just to say, you use the word colored. Yeah, so it becomes colored by the way I understand things. So for example, if I had a shamanic training, which means I'm connected to the energies of the earth and with the forces of the earth and things like that, and this Palladian being tells me that in order to heal humanity, you have to speak about healing or what have you. So because of my background being shamanic and things like that, I may understand that or interpret that as using the earth energies maybe to bring the healing. You see what I mean? So it's not wrong. It's just that it's the way I'm understanding the definition of healing, you see. So now you have two levels of interpretation. So the idea, as opposed to, for example, if I don't have a shamanic healing training background, for example, and my training is more Buddhist or something completely different, or maybe no training, nothing. I've never, this is my first spiritual experience, and I get this message, for example, then I may interpret it as healing. Maybe I should be going out there and speaking about healing. You see, so I would interpret it as the actions that would follow, depending on the way my interpretation is going to be different. So that's the difference. So, and perhaps it is okay for it to be this way. That it means that you channel your information in your way, and he channels the information in their way. You know, maybe it's okay that way. But for me, ultimately, because I see the different levels, why should I go get the energy of source, which is to me, again, the source of all of creation, I mean, of all of existence, of all of levels of awareness, of all that, of everything. Why should I go to the tree or nature where source is also part of that to receive the knowledge, if I can directly go to the main guy, so to speak? You see what I mean? So that's the argument. And so I feel like eventually these connections and these messages and these downloads are useful, but I feel it's only a step to the next level and the next level and the next level, which is ultimately the direct experience and download from the source.
So essentially what you're saying is if, let's say we have two channels, one's Japanese and the other one speaks English, they're both receiving the same codes, but one may be speaking in Japanese and the other one in English, and there may be some words that, or some information that comes through in the codes that have a direct translation in one language and not another. So but in both cases, is the vibration of the codes still coming through the channel that in energy that's not spoken?
Yeah, so I think your question has two questions. I mean, the first part is exactly what you said. If it's the same information going through a Japanese speaking person or a French person, whatever, and the words aren't exactly it's not going to come out just exactly the same things. It's exactly in the same way. So that's one thing. But the second thing that you mentioned is that it's still if it's still the same frequency or the same vibration, it is. But if the Japanese person, for example, has again a certain training, certain preconceived ideas, certain fears, certain blocks, then that same vibration is going to be filtered. It's going to be broken down and end up sounding and being different than the other person that has a different set of blocks and different set of fears and different set of preconceived ideas. But the vibration of the information itself, of course, is pure, is what it is. So the idea is not the idea is to train ourselves, our brain, to be as pure, as clean as possible, to be as clean and pure channels as possible. That's why, like I said, I created a whole protocol to make sure that before you enter in any sort of communication, to make sure that your brain channels are behaving a certain way, your vibration is positioned in a certain way, your physical body is positioned in a certain way, and so on and so forth, so that, I mean, Ethan, come on, everybody's got a few blocks, if not a few hundred blocks, of some sort, a few fears. I mean, that's kind of the human condition. The idea is, one, to reduce these blocks to the maximum, which is, the ultimate healing. That's what we're here to do. The more you clear your blocks, the more you become a pure instrument, purer and purer. And second, in the meantime, but if you're going to wait till you're 100% pure to get a piece of, a downloaded information, then that could take a whole lifetime. So in the meantime, as you are cleansing and purifying your instrument, you are also training yourself that in the moment that you are receiving that instrument, at least during those moments, to set aside, so to speak, those blocks, if you will, in simple terms, to not allow your subconscious blocks and fears to be in the way. Does that make sense?
Tell me what, now in conventional scientific belief, the understanding is that all thoughts originate in the brain and memories reside in the brain. So what is your perspective on that? What's the function of the brain versus thoughts and emotions, and is that different from the mind?
Totally different, and it's actually also connected to the definition of consciousness. So consciousness is a form of energy. There's different forms of consciousness, different forms of energy, but let's talk about the one that is relevant to the human brain and that allows you to think and to have emotions and so on and so forth. So you are originally a type of consciousness. You can originate from a universal space, or from another planet, or from another galactic system, or what have you. So that consciousness decides to manifest, to incarnate in human form. So you, for a particular reason, you don't just show up on the planet and say, I'm going to become a human just for fun. There's always, because creation is purposeful. It's not, it doesn't make sense for something to exist if it's not going to continue creating. It's kind of like within its own DNA. So here you are as a consciousness, as pure consciousness, you choose a particular human form that will allow you to have a particular experience that will expand your consciousness, because you continue creating from there. So you say, it serves my purpose in this lifetime to come in and, you know, have this kind of family and to be born in this part of the world and to have a certain type of energy in this human form in order to master the human condition, and to that will help me then expand my consciousness further. And so that consciousness already knows the whole story. You come in knowing what you are coming to do, and maybe not the specifics in terms of what you're going to eat every morning, not that sort of specific, but the specifics of I'm going to be attracted to junk food so that I can recognize the difference in how to take care of my human body. You see what I mean? So you have the overall story, but as you come in, this allows you with free will to continue to create. So your consciousness at that level has the overall story of what Ethann is going to be and do in this lifetime. Now you choose a human body that will serve that story. And as you come in, now you are interacting with the physiological aspect of your being, and that includes your physical brain. So your physical brain is capable of doing two things. One is to automatically to organically and automatically control and allow your physiological body to function the way it's supposed to. So you have that going with the human brain. But in addition to this, now you have this higher consciousness, this other consciousness that came from somewhere else, that has the ability to override whatever your human brain is doing, because it has the bigger story, because it knows where you are, where you're headed, what you are here to do. So now imagine that the physical brain is making your liver and your heart and all of that function, and then you also have an endocrine system, and you have a limbic system, and you have chemicals that make you feel emotions and things like that on the physiological level. But that consciousness, if you are aware and awakened, let's use that term, enough, you can look at the functioning of your brain and be able to change it and say, I'm noticing that my physical brain is sending out thoughts and emotions that are not aligned with what I'm here to do. You know, it's kind of like you're functioning at two levels. You notice that you're having thoughts of anger for no reason whatsoever. You're going in a store, you see something happen, and all of a sudden you're enraged about something, or or something happened and you have this crazy amount of sadness that overtakes you. So if you are aware and conscious and allowing this other level of existence to basically oversee, if you will, it's kind of a strange term, to look over what your brain is doing, what your brain is telling you, then you can change it. You can say, wait a minute, that doesn't feel right that I should be so angry. That doesn't feel right that I should have negative thoughts about this person, that I should have, So then you stop right there, and your consciousness that has the ability, that is actually larger, it contains a mechanism that controls your physicality. That's the DNA of your consciousness. So then you sit in your space and you say, my higher consciousness is commanding my brain to change that pattern, to erase the pattern or the programming that's making my brain shoot out all these chemicals that are making me angry. And that's how, as you are doing this work, you start to tap into the subconscious mind. You start to see the root cause of what is triggering this pattern of anger, let's say, of response. And then you can change it at that level, at the level of the root cause, of the subconscious. And the minute you do that, your physical brain kind of adjusts. You know, it's kind of like looking in your computer, and you know there's a bug that's messing up your system, but you don't know what the bug is. You see all sorts of stuff happening. So you sit down, you look through all the applications, you see, okay, and then you take the time to find that bug. And the minute you delete it, then your computer starts to function again. You know, so it's kind of like that. It's kind of like that. So the brain actually is doing its job to maintain your physiological aspect, but it's given direction from your higher consciousness. So that's the beauty of this, that because otherwise, so when people tell you, oh, but it's genetic, you know, you are born with these genes and that's it, you know, you're just going to have to, because you have a grandparent and your parent was schizophrenic, whatever, and you have that gene, that's it. I don't agree with that. In fact, in my work and in the movie, actually, we showed scientifically that you can not only change the chemistry and the functioning of the physical brain, but you actually can change the DNA. So DNA means genes. So that's why, I mean, this is think about it, Ethann. Nobody tells us this. No, quite the opposite. As soon as we have a problem, we have a pill that can cure it. As soon as we have a problem, we have a statistics that justifies that problem. And so we are not trained to look beyond that. And so you do that from one person to another, from one generation to another, over hundreds of years, and now you have a civilization that doesn't know how to tap into their higher consciousness, and doesn't know how to heal itself, doesn't know how to resolve its problems.
So mind and consciousness exist outside of the brain. And, but I want to understand, is our human experience predestined to a degree then? Did I come into this life to experience certain things at certain times and meet certain people? And so those things are decisions I made prior to incarnation. But if I'm understanding correctly, we have the power to, with our minds, to alter our experience of how we experience those things. So for example, let's say I was always meant to meet somebody at a certain time and have some kind of human experience with them. And let's say in that human experience, I became angry. But I have the ability to alter how I experience that and perhaps go through it in a very peaceful, more conscious state. Does that make sense? Or?
Yeah, exactly. But I also want to clarify the point of mind. I think I didn't mention that, where mind fits into the definition. So the part of your consciousness that has the ability to override, so to speak, the functioning of your brain, that is what I call mind energy. So mind energy is bigger, or is part of your consciousness that allows your brain to change its pattern and change its physiology and everything else. So now going back to your story, it's exactly like that. So we come in, like I said, before coming in, we say, okay, I'm here to, in this lifetime, I want to master the human fears, the human condition. And part of that is the fear of being alone. So I'm going to create a relationship that will, and usually you don't come in by yourself. You come in with spirit family or other consciousness that are similar or that originate from the same place usually. And so that's the reason why sometimes we see people and we recognize them from somewhere. It's not just a past life, it's actually even beyond that. It's even at a consciousness level. And so we come in and we say, okay, well, at the age of 30, I'm going to meet this person and I'm going to program myself in my story that as soon as I meet them, I'm going to feel so attracted. I'm going to be like, this is fate, it's meant to be, and so on and so forth. And so that happens, as you well know. I'm sure many people can relate to that. But because you are here to master your human fears about being alone or being betrayed or what have you, that relationship, you're going to know that you're meant to be together. But all of a sudden, this person dies, or this person betrays you, or this person leaves you for someone else or whatever. And you're like, so wait a minute, I was so sure, I was guided, I felt for sure we are meant to be together, but then she left, or, so then it gets very confusing. That's the reason why right then we need to stop. And so as you are creating this, you always have the free will. When you meet this person, you still, even though you feel very strongly attracted to them, because you still have the free will, you still have to choose it, you can still say, I feel maybe this is a human thing, I'm not gonna talk to them, or I'm not gonna get into this relationship, for example. So you're fighting your feelings. And so you still have that free will. You also still have the free will that if you were to get into that relationship and that person suddenly leaves or dies or what have you, or cheats on you or something, this is also where you have the free will to decide, do I stay with them, or what is this about, and why did I trigger this, or why did I create this, in order for you to master that story that you came to do. If you came to master the fear of being alone, then you have to get yourself to a place of being totally fine if the relationship didn't work and if you ended up alone. But most of the time, what happens, our fear kicks in, our confusion kicks in, and then with that, because we're not guided, we're not creating from a higher perspective, we got a couple of kids along the way, and now we're complicating our decision making, and you see how we're starting to change our story. Our story is having now to, excuse me, our story is now having to be rewritten, if you will, because you've added more confusing elements that weren't meant to be there. In other words, even though our higher consciousness and our higher mind has the story and is capable of changing, but our human aspect has the ability to change the story, and the free will of the human mind is the problem, if you will. And because the human mind is not well awakened, not well aware, not well educated in that sense, you make certain choices that change your path most of the time. And if you change your path, by the time you're 60, 70, 80, what have you, you've changed have not mastered your fear of being alone. You have not mastered your fear of being poor or whatever, material wealth or whatever you want to call that. You have not mastered your fear of being separated from your source. You have not mastered a bunch of things. Maybe you've done a couple of things. But then at the age of 80, you're like, oh, so now I have to go back. And then I haven't done 70% of the stuff that I said I was going to do. So guess what Alzheimer is? Alzheimer, you are starting to be on the other side. And so that's why you don't remember, because you're already kind of passed on mentally, if you will, on a mental level, on a mind level, to the other side. And you are realizing that you haven't done the stuff on this side. And so you keep yourself here in this weird space because you are still hoping to repair all of the stuff that you didn't do in your whole lifetime. So all of a sudden, you want to see your children that, you abandoned. You want to make amends with all these people. That's why before you leave at this age, you kind of want to repair as much as possible before you continue on, because you know that once you go back to the other side, if you haven't completed 60%, 70% of what your story said you're going to complete, you're going to have to come back and do it all over again. I mean, at least for the remainder of the 60, 70%. You see what I mean? So that's why the faster we are conscious, we understand that we're not just here by accident. We're not just here hoping for the best. Your consciousness has created this life every moment you are making a decision that is changing the course of that story. The faster you're aware of it, the faster you take control of it, the faster you're going to be able to master it and therefore succeed in a way. Does that make sense?
Yes, but I just want some clarity on what you said. In that situation, if a person did actually master the experience of being alone, it doesn't really alter the fact that they're alone, right? They're still going to be alone in that life because that's the life they chose. So when you're talking about mastering it, you're talking about learning to be with that experience from a higher level, but it doesn't mean that they're going to end up not alone.
Exactly. So that's what's beautiful about that. You came to master the fear of being alone. The minute you master that fear, then it means the minute you say, you know what, if that means I'm going to be alone for the rest of my life, I am totally okay. I am totally okay. Because I know that my presence on the earth has a much higher meaning, much bigger meaning. I am connected to the source. I'm creator consciousness is coming through me. No matter what I do, if I'm with somebody, not with somebody, I am going to make use of that consciousness. I'm going to help other people. You see what I mean? So the minute you get to that place and it's genuine, you're not just saying that, then you have mastered the fear of being alone. It means that mastery is over. You don't need to experience it again. Then you have the free will to actually stay alone or to be with somebody, in which case that new relationship is going to be based on wholesome principle. Because you're not there out of fear of being alone. You're in a relationship because you really want to be with that person. Does that make sense? And do you see the difference? Most of the relationships are based on the fear of not having the relationships. That is the problem.
So in that situation, the person doesn't actually have to be alone then?
Exactly. So the minute you master that lesson, so to speak, then you have the option to either or.
I see.
You see what I mean? That's the point.
So just to take that a step further, so does the law of attraction really actually apply, the idea that of the law of attraction that's been going around for the last 10 or 20 years or so? So is it possible, for example, for anyone to think or with emotion into being anything that they want, or do we all have a certain predestined experience that we don't actually have to try to create? It just will happen naturally because of who we came here to be.
Exactly. So the one that you don't even have to try to make happen is the one that's in your story. And in fact, these are the experiences that when you least expect it, it just happens. Because it's just that's part of your story. It's a co-creation from before, and it is going to happen. So these are the predestined, if you will. But again, your response to it is still live, so to speak. You still have to choose it. You can still change it. You can still say no. That's the beauty of it. Because think about it. If it's predestined and everything is predestined, then you start to feel like a machine, you know, like, oh, so this person came into my life, I guess I'm supposed to, and they asked me to marry them, and I feel I'm supposed to, and I feel it's fate, then I'm just going to marry them, then I feel that, you know what I mean? Like, then you become very passive. You become just kind of whatever happens to you is. And that's a dangerous place to be, because that's why there's kind of a fine line between what is part of the story and the fact that you still have to choose it. You still have to look at it and say, I am choosing it because I feel it's fate. But the part maybe of the children or moving to some other country or some island or something, I don't know. Not because I married the person that I feel it's fate, that everything that's part of that is fate. You see what I mean? That's the danger. Every moment you still have the free will to say, I'm choosing this, or wait, that does not feel 100%. I need to say yes or no.
So is it possible then for one individual to choose a path that they weren't meant to? So for example, with a lot of people who study or practice law of attraction techniques, because many of us are living who do that or in a westernized society, we tend to be influenced by societal expectations. So we tend to put the same things on our list of things we want to attract. So a lot of people want bigger cars and bigger houses and things like that. But is it possible that not everybody's supposed to have that because everybody has a distinct experience they came here to have? So is that why some people are not able to create what they set out to create using law of attraction, whereas others, it just comes naturally without much effort?
Okay, this is a great question, and it's about the law of attraction. So I want to say something in two different answers. First, the law of attraction, and I think it's amazing that it came about, and people are becoming aware, of it, and it's really helped so many people. However, the law of attraction is a law of the universe, it's a law of nature. And so it tells you that whatever your vibration is, you're going to attract. If you focus on the big house, you keep focusing on the big house, keep focusing on the big house. Don't go anywhere, like just have that vibration of the big house, visualize the big house, and so on and so forth. But what it doesn't tell you, unfortunately, the law of attraction, is that it doesn't talk about your subconscious mind. So my conscious mind is saying, I want the big house. I am in the big house. I can see myself in the big house. I feel so good in the big house. This big house is amazing. It's so me, right? So my conscious mind is focusing on that frequency, and I'm repeating it over and over and over. It's fantastic. But at the same time, my subconscious mind is saying, I will never get this house. I am not worthy of having a big house. Plus, I kind of feel guilty of having a big house when there's refugees in Syria or what have you. You see what I mean? So that is the problem with the law of attraction that's not very clear out there. And that is the part of the work that I do, is that before you start to say, I want the big house, I see myself in the big house, go and see what your subconscious mind is saying. Because as you are, so that's the reason why, just to answer your question, that's the reason why no matter what you do, the law of attraction, the way it's presented right now, won't work for everyone. Because what happens, it's all about the momentum. This means that if my subconscious mind has 20% of stuff holding me back, like I'm not worthy, I feel guilty if I have a big house. Let's say it's only like, just 20%. But 80% of my conscious mind is saying, I'm going to get this big house. I can see myself in the big house. And so what happens is that momentum of getting the big house is very, very, it's large. It's a large percentage. That momentum of energy is going to attract the big house because you only have a few blocks, just a little bit of that. Do you see what I mean? But if you have 60% or 70% of subconscious stuff, the momentum of not getting the house is much greater, but you're not aware of it. You're only focusing on the 30%, and you keep saying, I'm going to get the house. I see myself in the big house. And you're ignoring the 70% of you that's saying, I will never get this house. I was born poor, I'll end up poor, and so on and so forth. And I feel better to be kind of invisible, and so on and so forth. So it's all about energy momentum. That's the reason why the law of attraction doesn't always work with everyone the same. So that's the reason why you have to, before you get into the law of attraction, you have to do the subconscious clearing, which is the methodology that I've created, because I could see the difference. I could see how the difference between one person saying, how come I've been wanting to attract a relationship and it just never works. And my friend, she just like has people pouring in out of nowhere. And I could see the difference. I can see this person has a major block that is subconscious, that's taking up the entire momentum. So no matter, she could be visualizing all day long for 3 years, ain't gonna happen, because the momentum of the subconscious energy is much greater. Whereas this person's block is not in the relationship. This person's block is on another level. Maybe it has to be with money or some other thing. But in this particular area, her story is different, you see. So that's why the problem with the law of attraction is that it's ignoring the invisible, let's say, forces that are also attracting at the same time. So that's the one answer to your question, which is why some people just get it easily. And so this is to say, you're saying, is it because this person is just meant to have it and this person is meant to never have it? I don't agree. You see, but this person is meant to have the experience. And the point is, like I said earlier, this person said, I'm going to be challenged in my story, in this lifetime, and I'm going to see around me a bunch of people who can create a big house and a relationship, and I'm not going to be able to. And that is going to propel me to look deeper into my self-worth. That is what I came to master. You see what I mean? So that's why it's not that this person is never meant to have that. Don't agree with that. It's just that this person hasn't figured out what she came to master in his story. The minute she does, I guarantee it, the minute you clear the subconscious block, that momentum, you have to manifest. This is the law of attraction. Make sense?
Yeah, so what you're saying is that anyone can manifest a house or most anything I imagine, into their lives, but some people may come into life with an obstacle in that area for them to learn and grow through. So those are the ones that may struggle to have financial success, whereas others just flows naturally because that's not a lesson they came here to experience.
Yeah, as opposed to this person is meant to never have that. No. You are meant to have anything you want. You came to experience the fact that it's difficult to have that, so that you can master your story, so that you can, you know what I mean? So that's the difference.
I see. So even somebody who came into life to experience poverty, let's say, could end up being quite wealthy and successful, but they first have to face that lesson or learning experience they came here to grow through.
Exactly, because they came to experience, how can they be in a material form, in a material reality, and not have all the material needs met. That's what they came to experience. But once they've done that, once they experience that and they master that, meaning, again, mastery is get to a point of being 100% at a deep cellular level, totally okay with where you are. And again, it's not a psychological thing. It's not, it's a true state of being that you are absolutely safe. You're absolutely comfortable and fine in this experience. The minute you do that, doesn't mean you're going to get rich. The minute you do that, you don't need to experience it anymore, but then you have the option to create rich, becoming rich or not, or staying. You see what I mean? You then can create the path that you want because you've already experienced what you said you're going to experience and you've mastered it. So it doesn't mean they have to be poor the rest of their life. That doesn't make sense because if you came to have the one experience and no matter what you do, you have to have it, then what's the point? Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, if you came to be poor and no matter what work you do on yourself, on your consciousness, no matter what you experience, you're going to be poor. So might as well do nothing. You see what I mean? And that doesn't make sense because you are here to create. You are here to create the reality. And as you experience something that you don't like or something like contrast, or you say, ooh, that just doesn't feel good to me. I don't feel like being poor or whatever, So you are still creating. You are still using your free will to create and expand your consciousness. As opposed to, that's it, I'm here to be poor the rest of my life, so I might as well sit and watch TV all my life. You see, it doesn't make sense.
So where do these lessons come from that we bring into life? Do we create those as in the in-between dimension before we incarnate into physical reality, or is that something that collective consciousness chooses, certain experiences for certain souls, or past life lessons that carry over?
So you come in again you come in knowing what your consciousness needs or wants to experience in order to expand your consciousness. So what you are needing is different than what I'm needing or wanting than the neighbor and the other neighbor. You know what I mean? So in general, everybody who incarnates as a human has to master the human condition, meaning the fear of separation, fear of lack, fear of those kind of main themes, if you will, because it comes as part of the package, part of being in a smaller vibrational range spectrum that doesn't give you or gives you the illusion of being separate from the whole. So everybody has those, let's say, generic themes, if you will, that you have to master. But beyond that, there are other things that you come to do that are very unique to you. So sometimes you come in from a particular galactic frequency or galactic civilization, and you need to, in addition to, having and mastering the human experience, you are also here to implant your frequency, your genetic code within this human DNA range, within this frequency. So now we're getting into a much larger picture and how a human civilization or a particular type of consciousness gets expanded. This is only one way. So let's make it, I'll give you an example, like a very simple example. Let's say you are, I don't know, your family in the Midwest and or anywhere, it doesn't matter. Let's say in America somewhere, and you're used to your family members, your traditions, your habits, your information, the way you understand the world is that bubble, if you will. Now, if a person comes from China or from Burma or from somewhere in Africa or somewhere else that is very foreign to you, and they say, well, I want to, kind of live in your house for a couple of weeks. The energy and the consciousness of that person is going to be added. It's going to kind of be implanted in this bubble that you are and that you've lived in all your life. So what happens is that energetically, there's all sorts of stuff that starts to happen. Not only your 3D day-to-day things start to change because they're saying, oh, you guys drink coffee in the morning? We drink herbs or something. Or we smell the roses or what have you, or we pray or something. And so not only at this level there are changes that start to happen, but on an energetic, on a consciousness level, because don't forget, your consciousness is always with you, your higher consciousness. You only look at your human body, but your higher consciousness is always there. So the higher consciousness of that person is now being, let's say, it's merging, is mixing with the consciousness of your family and your own. And there is a natural, organic mixing and transfer of information that happens even on a consciousness level. And so now if you take that, and that means that when this person leaves, they take off and say, okay, after 2 weeks, I'm done. This is great. This was great being with you. Their consciousness is still there. And so because it got transferred, and the same with him, he takes with him the part of your consciousness that's energetically kind of got transferred. And so then this person leaves, but their consciousness pattern, their consciousness signature, if you will, quantum signature, is still part of your energy. And so and then after they leave, you somehow feel transformed. So sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's not so positive, but the point is, that's an organic, speaking of universal laws, this is a universal law. Every time two people come together, there's an energetic exchange, period. That's how it works. So I've exchanged something with you, you've exchanged something with me, and the idea is for me to recognize that the things that I don't like, that I can reject back, but the things that I love, I'm going to keep and learn from, you see. And so that's how you expand now on a much bigger scale. That's how you expand a species. So now this galactic, very evolved spiritual consciousness comes in the human body, you see, on a bigger level, on a collective level. And the same thing starts to happen. Their quantum signature, that their consciousness starts to decode and get transferred within the collective consciousness of the human. And why you bring a bunch of those on the earth, and that's how those frequencies start to be exchanged, and that's how you evolve a species, or not evolve a species, which is a different conversation. So that makes it, bringing it back to your question. If you were that being, if you were that galactic, very advanced being on the earth, well then, you didn't come here just to master the human condition. You're doing that. You're going to do that. But in addition to this, you are also transferring that magnetic field, or however people understand that, but that frequency within the collective consciousness, and that is part of your work. So in that case, you're going to be, for example, guided to maybe do healing, or, speaking, or do some sort of work that allows you to do this in a conscious manner. So that's the reason why there are no two beings on the earth at any moment in time that have the exact same story or the exact same purpose. And even if you come back over and over, for every single time, even if it's ever so slightly, every single life experience is going to be different, because creation is not redundant. It doesn't make any sense for you to repeat the exact same thing. You repeat an experience in a different configuration to master it, but you don't do the same thing over and over and over. It's just not purposeful. It doesn't evolve. It doesn't push forward the evolution of the universal consciousness.
So is all experience linear then, or are all lifetimes happening simultaneously and interacting with each other? So for example, is it possible for me in this incarnation to alter something that would have a ripple effect on a past life experience in this linear timeline?
Your questions are amazing, and it's all in my books and in my teaching. So amazing that you're talking about that. So here's the thing. It's not linear. In fact, again, let's go back to the example that you are coming from Andromeda. You're a galactic being, and then you're looking down at the Earth and you're saying, I'm going to master this, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to, after I master the human condition, I'm going to then expand my awareness and share my quantum signature or my frequency with the Earthlings, and so on and so forth. So when you have that story from that perspective, you look down, and then when you look within the planetary grid, the grid, that's a whole different subject, and it's a very important subject. Let's say for now, just talk about the grid as a consciousness. So when you look down at the Earth consciousness, let's say, you realize that from your perspective, when you're going to dip down into this range of frequency, this range, this spectrum, you're going to have, it's going to take you about that story at a galactic level equals maybe 7 to 10 lifetimes, for example. So because there is no time space from that perspective, and that planetary grid create time space, like you're basically coming from timelessness into time space, Earth time space. Because of that, you're going to fragment. You can calculate. You can say, oh, well, I can come in at, in the year, 2000 BC. Of course, there's no BC from that perspective, but just for the sake of clarity, I'm going to come in, in the Egyptian, in the Pharaoh times, and I'm going to have a lifetime there. I could be about 60 years there, and then I can come back at the time of Christ, and I can be there for 50 years, and then I can come back in the 12th century, and I can, be born there and do that, and so on and so forth. So you actually can calculate your trajectory to finish that whole story, and that trajectory means many lifetimes. Nobody can do it in one lifetime, although that's another topic, but we're talking about a typical scenario. So these many lifetimes, from that perspective, are actually parallel. They're actually simultaneous, because from a timeless perspective, looking into time-space, you are saying, I need to be here for 60 years, here for this year for 70 years, for here 30 years, or whatever. All of this equals the one story, and for me to finish my whole story. And so because of that, from that perspective, it is actually one life with many parallel aspects. But as soon as you dip in, as soon as you show up the first time, Atlantis, or what did we say? We said the pharaohs. Okay, let's say this was the first time. I doubt it, but let's say that was the very first time. So this very first lifetime now becomes linear to you, because you are now within time space, and you're having to live your 3D life in a linear way, tomorrow, and it's 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. So it's very linear. And everything that you're going to do, let's say, like I said earlier, you say that in the 60 years at the time of the pharaohs in Egypt, I'm going to master the fear of greed, let's say. And you don't. You, in 60 years, you steal from everybody and you whatever. You don't finish that. Well, guess what? That thing that you didn't finish gets added on to the next one that you said you're going to finish in 50 years. Well, the next one that you said you're going to finish 50 years, now it's going to be 80 years because you didn't finish the last one. You see what I mean? So that's the problem. That's why every lifetime is changing the overall trajectory, the overall story. And that's why you have to realize whatever you're doing here is affecting whatever's yet to come on so many different layers. And the idea is that the faster you master the story, the faster you finish, if you will, or at least if you are on target or on time, let's say, then you can finish in these 7 or 10 lifetimes that you said you were going to finish, and then you can leave the human plane, and then you're done. So your consciousness at the galactic level has expanded tremendously. You finished that story, so now you can go on to another planet or another galaxy. But the problem is, because humans come in a human form, and from a linear perspective, they get lost right and left, and they don't realize it's fate and there's nothing I can do, and I'm going to be poor all my life, and it's my nature or whatever, and it's evil and it exists and that's the way it is, and I'm making the wrong decision and changing my path and changing my course. Before you know it, you're trapped over and over and over in a reincarnation cycle that's lasting thousands of years. And that's the problem. So it is parallel and simultaneous from the beginning, from the original perspective, but from a linear perspective, it keeps affecting. And the idea is the level of mastery, meaning at the very end, if you will. And a lot of people right now on the earth can feel this is their last lifetime. And this is what also people are refer to this right now on planet Earth is a very interesting time because, well, for many reasons, but on an individual level, because we're talking about the individual consciousness. On an individual level, many people are sensing and feeling that this is the final kind of wrapping up their entire incarnation cycle. So it's a graduation, it's a major graduation time for so many people. So it's very, very, very exciting.
Now, getting back to your example, is it possible, like you said, in Egyptian times, let's say I had a lifetime where I was trying to master greed, but I didn't master it. So let's say my next lifetime is happening now, and I'm again trying to master greed. Suppose in this lifetime I do master it. Does that in any way have a ripple effect back to the lifetime in Egypt when I didn't master it?
Yes, exactly. So it's not linearly like that. It goes more to the global, if you will. It kind of like shifts back, what you were supposed to do and repairs, if you will. It's kind of, I'm using simplistic terms, but just to say, yeah, it kind of readjusts what was supposed to happen there. And the idea, again, in one of my courses, at the end, because at the end, when you start to feel or sense that this is your last lifetime, so in one of my courses, we actually kind of merge, or we kind of go back and we bring all of the past and parallel lives together. We start to clear the final, let's say, leftover stuff, not just from this lifetime, but that pattern from all of the past and parallel lives. You know, at one point you could just do that because you've cleared enough and you're towards the end of, you're close to the graduation time, that you can repair and cleanse on thousands of lifetimes just like that.
So how does the Akashic Records play into that?
Again, amazing question. So what happens is that the Akashic Records have to do, are on many different levels, because, you know, sometimes people think it's the collective consciousness, but it's on many levels. You have the Akashic Records on a planetary level, meaning every time you have a thought, I have a thought, the neighbor has a thought, every single thought, every single pattern, emotional pattern that is over 14 seconds, because it's a energy, it's momentum, gets basically registered. It's kind of like it gets stuck, it gets transcribed, you know, because these are particles of energy. It's not the fact that I have a thought and you can't see it. I can see it, by the way. It's particles of energy. There are particles of energy that are leaving my brain every time I speak, and same with you, same with everyone. So these particles of energy and waves, we can see waves, people know about waves, but the particles of energy, it's waves and particles of energy. So these particles of energy, that are like photons of light. Photons of light are waves and particles, are actual energy particles. Like, I mean, they're physical in a sense. The fact that you don't see it or you call it a thought doesn't mean it's not physical. It has a physical component. And that energy particle, it's kind of floats up. If it's maintained for over 14 seconds, it gets stuck, if you will, again, using a simple term, stuck to the fabric of space. So the fabric of space is extremely complex. It's very well organized. In fact, that's what I was talking about earlier, the planetary grid. There's a kind of like a cosmic web that's around the planet. It's the collective, you know, it's not just the collective consciousness, but it's actually the fabric of space itself. You look around and you think it's empty space, but there's actually a fabric. There's actually particles of energy, and they're also specifically organized. It's not random particles floating around. They're organized in such a way as to have black holes in a specific geometric pattern. So if you can imagine a huge hologram around the planet, okay? I have all of this in my books too, and in my courses. It's fascinating to see, you know? So for the folks who are listening, if you could visualize a huge hologram, like a web, all around the planet, up to about 5,000 to 7,000 miles above the surface of the planet, and you are on the surface of the planet. So every time you have a thought, it kind of gets registered on those particles of energy, leave your brain, and get stuck, if you will, on the surface of this fabric. And because there are black holes everywhere in a very specific locations, the black holes are kind of like the portals. It's kind of like where, again, I'm trying to be not too technical here, but it's kind of where you bypass time and space. But if you can imagine, there's this hologram and there's all these black holes, and then there's information that from my mind and your mind and his brain and everyone's brain that is on this fabric. So what happens is that because it's a hologram, because it's coherent mathematically throughout, all of these 0 points, all of these black holes are resonant, meaning let's call them mathematically coherent, meaning they have the same frequency range. Again, I'm simplifying. So that when I'm here on the earth and I want to tap into So this is what we call the Akashic Records. Records meaning it's recording everything you're saying. I'm only talking on a planetary level because it continues to happen on galactic and universal level. Let's focus on the planet. So if I'm sitting here and I want to tap into the Akashic Records, and I am located in Los Angeles, and because the fabric of space and this cosmic web is everywhere, it means it's all around me, from my body, from my brain, to the first available black hole that is close to me. In fact, it's right outside. And so what happens is that because this black hole is has the same resonance as the black hole where you are, Ethann, and above China, and above the Middle East, and above the North Pole and the South Pole, because these black holes are everywhere. Like I said, they're perfectly coherent and perfectly organized. This means that all of the information from around the world is present and available through any black hole possible. So when I tune into this black hole, I'm basically tuning into all the black holes throughout the planet. And so this has nothing to do with this. Also, rather, it contains time-space. So this means that this is part of the Earth plane since the beginning of time, since its conception. So this means that the information is not just you and me, what we're thinking today and now on Tuesday, whatever day it is, at this particular time. It's since the beginning of time, meaning since the very first guy, the very first human that started thinking, that showed up on the earth and started thinking. So imagine the amount of information that is present within this structure. And that is what we call the Akashic Records. So I can tune in if I want to find out anything in something about my past life. I can retrace it through this Akashic Record. If I want to find out something about the human species, something more global, I can tap into this library of information through this black hole structure and find it everywhere. And retrieve it that way. So that's what I call the Akashic Records, and that's how it works. And the way and the reason, again, we're talking about a lot of technical things, but trying to keep them very simple. Simplistic terms, you have to also realize that your physical brain has the exact same structure as that cosmic web. This means that my physical brain, your physical brain, have this geometry, this hologram, and has the exact same 0 point or black hole alignment. So if there are thousands of 0 points specifically in that geometry, well, on a miniature level, they exist in my brain and your brain. And that's how my physical brain is capable, because my physical brain becomes coherent with this cosmic web around me. And that's how it works.
So you can see thoughts and emotions. What do they look like to you?
So thoughts look very electric. Like they feel like just like an electrical spark, and also they feel like clusters. They're blocks of electricity. That's how they feel. They look like to me. Emotions look like a cloud, so they're more like just like a cloud. And so usually when a person is angry, usually it's a very dark red color. Sometimes when a person is sick or has something is severe depletion in a physical body, it's a brownish, very brown or gray, usually gray. And black has several, usually I see it as a black cloud. sometimes it's missing. Something is missing. Like, for example, if you had a surgery and something is missing in your body. Sometimes it's black there, but also fear is black. I mean, when I look at the person's energy and I tune into that black cloud, 99% of the time it's fear. Unfortunately, also sometimes that black color is an attachment, is an entity that is attached to you. So that also happens. But you asked me about emotions. So that's how they look and feel different. And these clouds could be kind of small, and sometimes they're a little bit bigger. Very different. But then when you start thinking, it's like a little, it's electricity. It's electric, and it's harder. I want to say it's not so soft in texture, if you will. That's how it looks, and that's how I know, and that's how I see that it's different. When you're speaking, something happens, and then when you're feeling, it's a completely different vibration altogether.
And so this is different from the aura, right? So these thoughts exist separate from the aura?
Yeah, it's different because in addition to this, then you have the aura. You know, it's specifically that emotion that you are sensing. Well, actually, I don't know if, the aura photography, I don't know if they're catching some of the emotional clouds. It's possible. But I see it specifically. Like, how sometimes the aura, it's in a generalized color. Well, for me, I see specifically like a red here that means anger, and it's about, something with your mother and things like that. And then it's a specific thing around, the elbow, or, it's more specific than an overall. I think the aura is a bit more overall, like state of being.
What happens to our thoughts and emotions after we're done thinking them? So let's say, for example, someone is experiencing fear over something, and then the next day, that fear that they experienced today is not there, but what happened to that feeling and the thoughts associated with it?
That's the problem, is that they don't go away. That's the problem. So when you have an angry feeling, and most of the time it's going to go to the organ that's the weakest in your body, and everybody's different. Some people it's the throat, some people it's the heart, so it depends on where you usually store your blocks. But so that energy, as soon as it comes out, it just doesn't go away. And then when you keep it goes, it stays. In other words, it came out of you and it stays in you. So if it's around your cells in your throat, well, it's in the cells of your throat. And so if you do that over and over and over, eventually the cells of your throat have so much information that wasn't there, which is your angry feeling and emotion, that it becomes distorted, that cell can no longer function. It doesn't have the original spin. A spin is the vibration, is the frequency that allows the cell to repair itself. So it's used to spinning at 700 hertz, but then if you add information or the frequency of anger, which is 75 hertz, or you keep putting 75 hertz, 75 hertz, 75 hertz over and over and over, well, now you are telling the cell of your throat to function, to rotate and to vibrate at 75 hertz as opposed to 700 hertz. And so after a while, if you do that for a long period of time, the cell says, okay, if that's what you want me to do, fine, I'm not supposed to, but, so you keep telling me that that's how I'm supposed to behave. So it takes on that energy, that new frequency, and eventually it reprograms itself to function and vibrate at 75 hertz. 75 hertz is extremely low for that sort of cell, and then multiply that by trillions of cells, and eventually you get thyroid disease, and you get this, because the rotation, the vibration of the cell is what keeps it repairing itself. But if you slow it down and it's not repairing itself, well, that's eventually how you get sick. Same thing with the thoughts. It's exactly the same thing. So that pattern, whatever you're saying, I'm not good enough, and whatever the pattern is their actual particle of energy that have a frequency. You put that in the cell over and over and over, and eventually the cell learns to behave that way. And so, and the reason why I know this also, like I said, because I see the subtle energy so clearly. So now I'm working with you, not you, Ethan, but with a person, and I can see that in your throat there's this big block. And as I look, very carefully, I can read the information that's inside the cells, and inside the cells I can see that you have anger at this particular age, at that particular time, with that particular person, and then you had it again, and you had it again, and you had it again. But of course, if we kind of usually go to the biggest amount of anger or time or trauma that happens, and then that pattern looks different than the belief system that you have, which is your thought of I'm not good enough, what have you. And so unless you take that out of the cell can no longer repair itself because you told it not to. And so that's the reason why, that going back to the conversation about dipping into the subconscious mind, that's what the subconscious mind did. You subconsciously taught your cell to change its frequency and to put in new information. So unless you take out that information is there. It's not going anywhere. You told it to be there. Why should it on its own leave? That's the reason why. When you, with the law of attraction or what have you, or visualization or affirmation, and you're saying, but I do want this house, but I'm seeing myself in this house, and I am worthy of this house, and I'm loving this house. Yes, but guess what? Your throat is also containing all of this anger, all of this negative information that is going in contrast, that's pulling you in the other direction. That's why you don't create it. The thoughts and emotions don't dissolve on their own. You created them, you put them there, you have to take them out. It's as simple as that. And people think, well, it doesn't make sense. How do you take them out? Well, it actually, even if you don't believe it, you can just try it. Just try it. And that's what happens. Sometimes I get people who are like, the wife understands these principles, but the husband doesn't believe it or whatever. And sometimes for new people who don't believe, they can just try. I mean, they have nothing to lose. You're not buying a drug. You're not ingesting anything. You're not, a lot of the stuff is free on my website. I have tons of healing meditations that are free. So you can just go and try and see if something happens or not. I guarantee 99% of the time, like once in a while, I have one person who says I didn't feel anything, and it's usually because they're afraid to feel, not because it didn't work. But this stuff works. You just don't know how to do it. We're not taught to do it. And so you do the release, you look at your throat, you focus on your throat. It's a little bit of a protocol, but once you know how to do it, you take out the thought, you take out the emotion that you put in all these years, and it goes out. It does go out. And now when it's out, you see. Now you can say, I want the house, you see, because there's nothing holding it back. That's how it works.
Are all health problems the result of thoughts and emotions that are stored then, or could it be possibly affected by other low frequencies in our environment, or maybe our diet or anything else?
Of course, it's a combination. I mean, most of the time it starts with the thoughts and emotions, because you're starting as a child. You're starting as a child looking at your parents and saying, I feel small, I feel abandoned, I'm not good enough. Now I have a new brother that's cuter than me, nobody's paying attention, So you're starting to have a stage of 6 months. By the age you're 4 or 5, you've already accumulated a huge amount. I'm talking about in the average person, the average human. You've accumulated a new set of frequencies, new set of belief systems. And of course, it gets worse in your teens. I mean, we all know what happens, you know. You get into the competition, the peer pressure, and all of that. And so the average person is already coming in with a huge amount, by the time you're an adult, huge amount of emotional blocks and belief systems that are misaligned. In addition to this, then you have the food that is also information. So now your cells are learning to vibrate with a new emotion at 75 hertz. Then you feed it, you know, unhealthy food that is also very low vibration. Alcohol is extremely low. Of course, cigarettes and, you know, all of that good stuff is not good stuff. It's all of that. Everything has a vibration. Everything has a vibration. So if you're eating an apple, just think about the vibration that's going in your cell. If you're eating a piece of pizza, just think about that vibrational, the frequency that's going in the body. So most of the time, we're not counting, we're not thinking about that. We are eating the wrong stuff. So now the cell, on top of all the emotional stuff, you're adding the frequency of food, not to mention the environment. You're absorbing all sorts of chemicals through the air. And so what do you expect? I mean, by the time we're 30, it's like your cells are bombarded with all of this information. But I have to say, it starts off with all the negative, with all the emotional blocks and the belief systems. Because if you didn't have those emotional blocks and these belief systems, you probably would not be attracted to destructive behaviors, such as eating the wrong food or putting drugs or getting addicted. You know what I mean? So you already had a pattern of self-destruction emotionally and mentally, if you will, that also made you attracted to eating the wrong food and so on and so forth. And on top of all of this, we are in a very chaotic energy field here on the earth right now. So sometimes there are other beings that are messing with us as well. So it's a lot, you know, it's a lot. So, but the good news is, because, and don't forget, then we start taking drugs, meaning pharmaceuticals, you know, thinking, oh, well, that's going to help this and that's going to help that. Well, don't forget, that's also a frequency. It's a chemical frequency that is supposed to, you know, take out your pain or whatever. But as far as the cell is concerned, you're just adding more stuff to it. So now it has the information of your anger, it has the information of your thought patterns, it has the information of your food, and it has all of this chemical stuff. And it has to, oh, okay, so now I'm supposed to use those chemicals to fix all the other stuff. I don't know how to do this, you know, you see what I mean? Everything is a frequency, everything is information. So we get stuck in this pattern. So it sounds so overwhelming, because it is. I mean, just look around. That's how people are walking around this planet, with one problem or another, and trying to fix it with a drug, pharmaceutical or otherwise. The problem is not to add stuff, is to take stuff out. That's the first thing that people need to realize. You don't add vitamin C. I mean, you can in certain cases, but I'm saying, like, you don't add more information to the cell. You take out the stuff that you put in the first place. So that's the first shift in consciousness that can help. And the second thing that is extremely helpful is to realize that if you put it there, you put it there. You put it there. Not your parents. Your parents made it available to you, and you said, "Ooh, I'll take on that negative pattern." If you put it there so easily in your cells, it means you can take it out of your cells just as easily. That's the great news. And so that's what, because we're not, again, educated about that. We're not taught. We think, oh, our thoughts don't exist, or, don't think negative, we don't realize, we don't understand energy. We don't understand quantum particles, quantum signature. We don't understand the mechanics of all of that. And so that's why it's kind of like this invisible world, but it's not. It's all actually chemistry. It's all actual particles of energy, and it's all frequency that's very much real. And so to me, that is the good news, is that as you begin to understand all of this, you realize, my gosh, if my mind was so powerful to put all this information in myself, this means my mind is very much the same, just as powerful to take it out. So start taking it out. That's the good news.
Tell me about the genetic research that you did that you were speaking of earlier in your movie.
Okay, so what happened is that, so the movie that you're talking about is called Gods Among Us. And what I wanted to do is a documentary film. What I wanted to do with this film was to widen the perspective that we're not alone, obviously. There are other beings that exist, not because I know that for a fact, because I've encountered them myself, but also because many people around the world have had so many different encounters. So I wanted to, but we only hear about the fearful stuff. We hear about like grays and things that are like very negative and here to manipulate us and this and that. We never hear about, I'm talking about in a documentary film or in that sort of, perspective. We don't really talk about and understand all the other type of consciousness that is very much present and doing amazing stuff to help the humanity to heal, speaking of healing, and to expand. And so that was my first purpose, was to begin to introduce people to the fact that there are different types of consciousness that are very much in physical form, but also interdimensional, meaning, like I said earlier, there are beings who are coming in contact with us interdimensionally, meaning you may not see them, but they are there in the higher dimensional field and they are interacting with us. And so that was the first purpose. But what I wanted to do is not just talk about it. I wanted to bring some sort of physical evidence. I wanted to make it scientific. And so what happened was, as I was talking to different people, and I wanted to kind of see if I could bring some valid DNA research or something that could show that certain types of beings, once you come in contact with higher dimensional reality, your actual DNA may be affected, or are we all carrying the same DNA and that's it, So it was kind of along those lines, but as you start doing research and you start filming and talking to different people, the story keeps changing. Because they tell you, and you speak to experts, and I got people from Stanford to Harvard to, really very top-notch, credible, super, super qualified people, scientists and researchers as well. And so, of course, at the end of the day, you realize that the DNA research on the earth right now is mostly focused on genetics in the sense of illnesses, like do your genes, what is the gene for cancer and what is the gene for that, and how do you avoid certain illnesses, and that's what they're researching. There's nothing that, maybe some guy somewhere is researching something else, but usually that's what it's around. And what I was trying to find was more about the genetic code in terms of consciousness. In other words, what defines a human? What is that DNA like? And can it become upgraded? How do you evolve that? So that's kind of what I was getting at in terms of scientific validation. And so, of course, there's also some people who say, there's a big part of the genetic code that is junk DNA. We don't know how to decode it. The guy in Stanford, he's top-notch, very credible guy. He's also explaining how the more they discover codes within the DNA, the more there are codes. It's like there's codes within codes within codes. And so it's extremely complex. It's not so easy to take one DNA test and go, oh, okay, this is the list of things and this is who you are. It just doesn't work this way. And it's interesting. I think he even uses the word multidimensional. I'm not sure. But anyway, it's very complex. So I said, so I was thinking, so how do we bring that scientific validation to show that has anything to do with DNA? And so eventually I decided, instead of doing a bunch of DNA tests and comparing your DNA to my DNA to somebody else's DNA and seeing, because it's not complete. That's the problem. Even the most sophisticated DNA testing on the planet is just not enough. And even if you're discovering some things, sometimes the government kind of hides it away. But even then, it still doesn't mean anything. It could be a bunch of things, and so it's going to take a while. So I decided anyway. In this first documentary, I may do something else in the next one. In this first documentary, I said, okay, forget about decoding all these codes. Let's see how the DNA reacts if you bring in different energy. So that's the route that I went to, and it was extraordinary. We actually made a scientific breakthrough. A scientific discovery. So in one of the experiments, we actually brought an energy through transfer. So we took DNA from a human placenta, so it's a human DNA sample, and of course we measured it, the control before, and then the treatment was we would bring an angelic type energy and kind of see if anything happens. And sure enough, we did 2 measurements. I'm not going to say too much because I want people to go and enjoy the film and see. It's an actual scientific breakthrough. But in one of them, I can talk about that one. In the first experiment, the DNA the conductivity reacted tremendously as soon as that consciousness came in contact with it. So this means that if the conductivity was, at a certain frequency, after, we treated it, it shot up 400%. So what this means is that the conductivity means is how the energy flows, the electricity flows. Electrical conductivity, the speed of it, how fast it flows within the DNA. The fact that we brought in a consciousness and that conductivity shot up, increased, is extremely significant because it's shown scientifically, and you can Google that the conductivity in the DNA increases its ability to repair itself. Think about that. So if you have DNA, and of course, this is scientific, we did it in the lab and we measured it 100 times. I mean, you don't just do it once, so that's why this film I'm very excited about it. So the fact that at rest, it was doing whatever, and then we brought in a higher consciousness that came in contact with it, and it had that reaction, tells you scientifically that higher consciousness has the ability to change the conductivity, in this test anyway, of the DNA, meaning it has the ability to change its movement, the way it processes information, and the ability to repair itself. So that was the first huge thing. But then there's another test that we did, and something else that showed up. But I'm going to leave that as a surprise for the people who want to go see the film. I hope a lot of people will go see the film because I think this film is at a different level. We're not talking about a bunch of ETs, running around and the government hiding. It's none of that. It's more, who are we as a human species, as a consciousness, and then having those scientific experiments done, I think is extremely powerful and empowering. And I think it's bringing a lot of new knowledge to the planet.
So what are the tangible repercussions of this change in DNA that resulted from this consciousness shift? I mean, for a person who might undergo something like that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So scientifically, it's shown that the conductivity changes the ability to repair itself. So, we've basically, what we've done is it's a scientific experiment. So that's what we proved on camera. But how that translates into your body or somebody else's body, it only says that you come in contact with a higher dimensional being, or your own higher consciousness is doing that. That's what we've demonstrated scientifically. So if you have some sort of illness or some sort of something, your new DNA is supposed to be able to self-repair.
I see. So it could affect your health. It could affect your, maybe open up spiritual gifts. It's just different for every person.
Yes, but technically, I mean, if you are going to the DNA, it depends on if you have an illness or something. The fact that your DNA is repairing itself, it means you're self-healing. That's what this means. But yeah, there's no one size fits all. I mean, in terms of your question, because maybe it's healing. You're asking for physical healing, but somebody else is asking for something else. But regardless, your DNA has shifted. Your DNA is giving you the ability to shift itself, just like that.
Is this sort of a consciousness energy that you're referring to? Is this happening to us as a collective right now? And is the collective experiencing some kind of a DNA shift as a result?
That's what I was mentioning earlier, Ethan. We talked about those beings who are now present on the earth. So as you bring a higher consciousness and you implant it in an environment, well, that higher consciousness is going to unravel, like it's going to send its frequency, if you will, in the collective. That's exactly what's happening. And that's what I just proven in the film, that it does happen, that the DNA does register that contact, you see. In fact, the film is called The Science of Contact, but not, some UFO. It's at a completely different level. It's very, very powerful.
Where do our viewers find that film if they want to watch it?
Yeah, so I just finished the film, so it's actually premiering. It's going to be screened May 28th in New York City. At the Soho Playhouse, actually in a film festival. So, but the best thing is for people to go to the website. The film is called Gods Among Us. So it's godsamongus.com. And you can go to the events page and you'll see the next one, May 28th. And it's the first screening of the film. So I hope many people can make it because it's exciting. And what the film festival folks are doing, they want to do a panel after the screening. And so, of course, with myself, I'm going to answer some questions. And I have a scientist, the Harvard scientist with me, and a couple of the experiencers. So it's going to be pretty exciting and dynamic, because then people are not going to just watch the film, but we're going to have a sort of exchange, maybe like yours, super interesting, fascinating stuff. So if you are in the New York area, or you can get to the New York area, May 28th, I think it's going to be a very cool event and the first screening of the film. So it's very exciting. So go to godsamongus.com and we'll keep posting the updates, but on the events page, all the information is right there.
Tell me about the other work that you're doing, your various programs and the meditations that you have. How are they helping people, and how do you work with people on that level?
So, because like I said earlier, I created many methodologies for healing, but also for consciousness expansion, for receiving guidance, all of those types of protocols, and how to identify what the subconscious mind is doing. So I have a huge, actually, online library because of all the courses that I've already done, and people can go there and listen to some of the stuff that I've already done. But I also keep creating courses online, and also sometimes I create a workshop and people join live. And we post all of this on our website, in our calendar, but people can just sign up for a newsletter and receive all this information. Now, this other work is under the consciousness work, and that website is omniumuniverse.com. omniumuniverse.com, OMnium. And what I like also is that a lot of these meditations are free, because I like people to feel, to experience. For me, it's all of this knowledge came in a direct way. So I understand the importance of having a direct connection, a direct experience, as opposed to, kind of receiving a methodology and just repeating it. It doesn't really work. You have to feel it. You have to feel what it does to you in your body and how it registers. And then you can talk about it and you can work with it from an authentic place. So my YouTube channel, in fact, when you go to the main website, OMnium Universe, you'll see all the, the links and stuff. The YouTube channel has at least, I want to say, 130 videos, meditations, talks, experiential things. So you can go there and start to experience certain things. And some of them are very, very, very profound and detailed. I mean, it's not just a quick meditation. But if you want to go deeper into this work, on the website, to go to the university, and then you'll see all the classes, all the sessions, all the healing sessions as well. Go to the Healers Center, and then you see Healing Center, and you'll see all sorts of sessions, reprogramming, speaking of anger, or I'm not good enough, or all of that. There is the reprogramming your cellular memory. I have a huge library there as well. So you can work on this and see how it works. And you'll notice, I mean, like I said, this is so effective. As soon as you take out the information, it's gone. And so 99% of the time, you feel instantly something is different. You are different. It's not the same as, you don't have to do things over and over and over. Now, sometimes you have to work on the same thing for a while. I didn't say that you're going to do one session and take out all the anger in your entire life and every single thought of anger in one. Sometimes it is. Depends on the session, depends where you are in your evolution. But sometimes you need to work at it from a few different perspectives, and then it's gone. It's gone. And when it's gone, the cells heal right away, because you all this information that you put in is just out. So then the cell knows how to go back to its organic, natural rhythm, just like that. So the Omnium Universe website is more, like I said, about consciousness on all levels, healing, expansion, understanding who you are, and that sort of information.
Now, we're in an interesting time in the collective consciousness right now. It seems like there's a lot of dramatic changes taking place, not only in our physical reality, but also in spiritual growth and consciousness and those kind of things. Now, I have a couple of questions combined here, but is it possible that each human being experiences their own unique timeline of experience from another one? Because we can see right now there seems to be a lot of people with a more mainstream mindset are living in a more fearful world where there's war and politics and these kind of things. But then there's also this undercurrent of awakening and people who are living in an entirely different reality, such as the conversation we're having now. are there different timelines of experience that we individually choose to experience?
It's not so much a timeline as opposed as it is again, a web of information. We started talking earlier about the web that's around the planet. So this web, it's a reality. It creates earthly reality. And I encourage people who are interested in that to look again in some of the books or some of the classes. I call it the planetary grid. And so the reason why this is important is because this grid gives you the illusion of time-space and gives you, or the experience of time-space, and also gives you the ability to communicate long distances and beyond the human brain, and also to transport. But the reason why this is important is because when you enter and you're on the earth and you're within this web of information, you are existing in a type of reality. And because we said earlier, everything that you say, everything that I say, everything that he says gets registered on the fabric of this web, it means that we're tapping into this web and behaving according to this web of information. And so that is one reality, and that reality became very distorted. That's a whole different story. We could talk about that another time. But that web became distorted from even since 250,000 years. So one generation after another. And the earth that you're seeing today, the one that's addicted to war and greed and separation and hatred and all that, is still functioning within that reality. So that makes a lot of sense, that this web of information, even the Akashic record, of that consciousness still exists. It's distorted, and what's happening is that it's collapsing on itself, because it's based on self-destruction. It's not based on expansion. It's not based on unconditional love, and sharing. And so, but at the same time, there is a new web structure that came into place, and that happened in the year 2011, from 2011 to 2014. So since the year 2000, 2,000 years ago, I'm not going to complicate things. So over the last 2,000 years, basically, but it got completed in the year 2011 to 2014, in that range, because it's not one day. So this new reality is actually a new web. So it's like a new communication system, a new awareness, a new time space. So if you could imagine that there are two overlapping webs, two overlapping brains, you see. So those with the old paradigm thinking about war and separation and greed are still there. That's why you see it. But also there's you and I talking about connecting directly to the universe and self-healing and self-correcting and all of that, and mastery and all of that good stuff. That's because we are connected. We are connected, and we are tapping into that new brain, if you will, that new web. So that's the reason why people think that we are here to transform the old paradigm. Like, people have a feeling that we're here to heal them or something. It doesn't work this way, because that reality, first of all, speaking of momentum, has such a huge momentum. It's instead of, it's very hard to imagine. It's been doing this for 250,000 years. That all of a sudden, all of this momentum, all of this consciousness is gonna stop everything they're doing and all of a sudden start to go to shift to love and it doesn't even work this way, even from a physics standpoint, because there's already a momentum going in one direction. It's going to have to continue that momentum And because it's based on distractions, it's based on self-destruction, it's going to self-destruct. And what remains is this new consciousness, this new web that we are already tapping into. That's how it works. And that's how people get very confused and discouraged. They say, all the work that I've been doing, I can't believe we're still manifesting a reality with, human trafficking and racism and this and that. It makes a lot of sense because that reality has this huge momentum. And
this old reality that's been going on for 200, I think you said 250,000 years, did that come into being as a result of some lower vibrational extraterrestrial consciousness, or what brought that into being?
Yeah, it's a very long conversation. I wrote that in my books because I explained how this whole thing happened. But it has to do with, let's say, again, in a nutshell, with a type of consciousness that interfered with the proper functioning of that grid system. And I also said earlier that the human brain is coherent with this grid system, this reality. So if you mess up with that web, it messes up with your brain. So if you do that for thousands of years, you are now affecting one generation of human after another, then you are affecting and you're manipulating an entire species. And so because of that, it did start. So again, to answer your question, it started by a kind of an experiment, actually, from a larger, another dimensional type of beings. And it started with a kind of like an experiment on the human species that's very, very juvenile. It's a very young species, and it kind of took the wrong path, and it got worse, and it turned into manipulation eventually. And what you see today is the result of that. And so I want to say about 2/3 of the human species is affected with that huge momentum, but the other third, and with the new beings that have come in, with the new cosmic web, that is the new Earth reality that is now in place, is what that's what's gonna take the new Earth, the new species, to its next evolutionary path.
And do you see us seeing positive, tangible changes toward that direction in our lifetimes, or are we talking very, very long term?
Actually, the entire, let's say, if you will, the whole thing was going to take about 257 years from the year 2000. But I think the timeline, again, is not, linear. Like, there's always a range. I want to say from now another 150-ish, 57-ish years from now, the entire, basically the two webs, you know what I mean, will be complete, meaning the entire cosmic, the old pattern will self-destruct and the new will remain, or will split, or what have you. But within this 150, which is actually not that much, when people hear 150, they're like, oh my God, But think about it in terms of universe age is nothing. It's actually a few seconds. You know what I mean? So think about that. But within our lifetime, if in 100 years, not that much. If in 100 years you're going to have an entire civilization that is completely pure and clean, and from the physiological self to the spiritual to everything, that's a lot of shifting. So what we're gonna see, what we are seeing actually in our lifetime, are chunks. They're gonna start falling off, and I think it's very clear to see the big new chunks that's preparing to collapse, and is you can see politically a lot of the movements around the world that are becoming so obvious. I mean, like, really, around the world, there's all these big surges of, consciousness that is coming up to the surface to be healed and cleared. So that's what we're going to see in our lifetime. Chunks of organizations, communities, or ways of doing or thinking, and systems that will see collapse. But in chunks, because if everything collapses in one day, then then there's no survival. I mean, you can't survive if everything shatters in one instant. So that's how it's going to work. Politically, economically, financially, then spiritually, that sort of big chunks, I think we will see in our lifetimes.
Could you share again your websites and anything else as far as social media, and if you do any events where people may be able to find out about all that?
Yes, please. So for the film, like I said, I encourage everyone to go see it. The next screening is May 28th, New York City. If you're in the area, we can get there. I would love to see you. It's called godsamongus.com. And go to the events page. You'll see that event and also upcoming events. And for the folks who are in the Netherlands, I am doing a lot of things there as well. So all those events are on that page, godsamongus.com. And please go to the Facebook page. You'll see the links there. And what I like, it took me a long time I was very resistant to the whole social media thing. But, at the end of the day, it's just a place to connect. When I look at it this way, I guess I'm fine with it. And so it's also a way for you to show your support and just to show that, that you're not alone, that, we know that you're doing your best. And that's, from that perspective, I would love to have people just go to the Facebook page, share, like or whatever, send us your notes. Just for, again, speaking of momentum, for this consciousness to get bigger and bigger and more obvious and more real. So I encourage people to do that. And for the folks who are interested in just consciousness work, which the film is it's all about consciousness, but it's just for this live event. But for folks who are interested in healing and expanding consciousness, go to omniumuniverse.com, OMNIUM, omniumuniverse.com. And same thing, you'll see in the tabs, all the sessions, the classes, and the social media is right there. Click on the social media icons, the YouTube, and we hope to connect with you there. There's a calendar there as well. And you can sign up for the newsletter. That way, we don't like to bombard people, but if we're doing an event and we want people to know, then we'll send you emails. Otherwise, or upcoming classes, then we'll send you a newsletter. So we hope that you will come and join us, and hope to see you soon.
Well, thank you, Carolyn. It was a very fascinating conversation today, and I appreciate you sharing all of your wisdom and insights on those various subjects. And I'd love to have you back again in the future sometime.
Oh, thank you so much. You did great. Your questions were awesome. I loved it.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. I'll talk to you soon.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Awaken and Empower TV with my special guest, Caroline Cory. Join me next week as we speak with another incredible individual who's standing on leading edge and changing the world.